Too little or too much? It might be relatively easy to dress yourself for the weather, but when it comes to the kids, it can be a little bit more of a head-scratching decision because they can't tell us if they're hot or cold, or can they? Today on this episode of Mother Doctor Nurse, Paediatrician Dr. Deb Levy and myself, Paediatric Nurse Sarah Hunstead, are going to be talking all about how to dress your child for the weather. Particularly today, we're going to be talking about heat. We're also going to go into some heat-related illness subjects. But where I'd like to start today, just as I'm doing my introduction, I've got my dog who has just knocked over my cup of tea in front of me. But anyway, it was always going to happen, Deb.
Oh, Molly.
Yes, I had the lid on and it is just rolled onto the floorboard so I don't have to clean the carpet. Oh my goodness. Oh, if it's not Deb's dog, it's my dog. If it's not our dogs, it's the kids. But that's how we roll here with Mother Doctor Nurse. So good morning, Deb. We're coming to you from Paediatric country today. And I'm just wondering what else is going to happen while we're talking about this, Deb, because something else will. They always tend to. Oh, dear. So what we're going to start with today is dressing the kids in the heat. We're going to focus on young babies today. I think that's probably a good idea, or at least under the 12 months, because otherwise we could be talking about this forever. And we're going to focus next week on cold-related things as well. So heat this week, cold next week. But what we'd love you to do as well is please give us a thumbs up or a wave just to make sure that, all the technology is working as it should. Please ask questions, type them in the comments below as well, and tag anyone you think who will benefit from this good information. So, Deb, you are the oracle of all things. How do we appropriately for the hot weather? I mean, how do we know?
Look, I think I'm just trying to think of where to start. Look, I think the first thing to say is when it comes to choosing clothes for your babies, keep it as simple as possible. As Sarah mentioned, we're not going to talk about older children, and certainly not vocal children who are often, or toddlers who are very particular about what they want to wear. Here we're talking more about the younger babies. And what I always recommend to families is stick with cotton, organic if possible, but certainly limit all those, nylon, polyester, highly flammable clothes. Not only are they flammable and potentially a risk, they also aren't very good at allowing a baby to keep their temperature stable. Look, babies are not good at doing that anyway, and they typically are not good at maintaining their temperature. But polyester clothes just trap things in, and it's just not a good idea. So stick to pure cotton if you can. The other tip that I can...
Is that part of that? They just can't breathe. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they can breathe, but their skin and their skin can't breathe.
Meaning the clothes, yes.
Yeah. The other thing that I recommend is to layer. And what I mean by that is layer a few layers of clothing on your baby according to the temperature out there. So on a hot day, you may just have them in a simple cotton singlet or, those onesies. Baby grows, for those of you who aren't used to the Australian slang, and in summer again, it's the little ones without the sleeve. I should have brought a few. I've still kept some for my girls. And then what you can put over that, depending on how warm it is, light cotton leggings, light cotton top, and you can keep on layering depending on how cold it is. Layering is good because that means that if you feel your baby is overheating, you can then take some of those layers off. It makes it a lot easier than having to redress them. It also means that they have accidents, you do have other clothes with you, which is also a good thing. Yes. All of us have been struck by what I call the punani, when they get those disgusting poos that go all the way up their back. Those are fun. But that's for a different day, maybe. So the message around simple, pure cotton, layering clothes. The other thing with little babies, and we will talk about this in two aspects, is, is head coverings. And I'm pausing because I think we'll talk about it a little bit more when it comes to Sarah, when she talks about safety, and also when we talk about keeping babies warm in cold weather, which is next week. So at the moment, it's a simple clothing. If you are going to be outdoors in the sunshine, it's actually better to try and cover their bodies, especially, that under 6-month age, when you want to limit sunscreen. And then again, just loose cotton clothing on them. So I guess the next question is going to be, well, it's all very well, Deb, but how do I know if I'm doing it right? Is that what you're thinking, Sarah?
That's it. That's exactly right. So how do you know? I mean, you might have put the layers on your baby, but how do you know if you've put too much,
Yeah, look, I think that the main thing is that your baby's going to get ratty. If they're feeling cold or hot, they're going to cry, they're going to be grizzly. If they're incredibly hot, they can actually get drowsy, but usually they go through a really irritable, grizzly stage first. So if your baby is crying, looking miserable, squirming around, not being comfortable, have a look at them. See if they're flushed. That's another sign. Babies aren't so good at sweating. They haven't developed the ability yet, but they can certainly get red in the face. The other thing you can do is feel them. I mean, use your hand, feel their head, feel the back of their neck. You can feel their chest if you want, and see if they're hot to touch. Which, as I'm saying, I'm thinking, how families going to know it's not a fever? And that's a very valid point. And I think that the thing you need to do is, if you feel that your baby is warm to touch, take 1 or 2 of those layers off, put them in a cooler place. Maybe they've been in a warm environment, and take their temperature. If it is raised, close to that 38 mark, leave them a few minutes, see how they're doing, retake it. Often, I mean, Sarah, you and I've worked in emergency for many years. We'd have babies coming into us all wrapped up, many layers, with a fever of like 38 degrees. We'd unlayer them, and then their fever would go away. Obviously, we've spoken at length about fever. We're not going to talk about that today. I guess the point that I'm just making is that over wrapping can actually raise your baby's body temperature.
It's certainly not something that we would expect, a baby just from clothing to be sitting at, 39, 40 degrees, particularly if they're looking up. No. So that's something that we're not saying. We're simply saying that baby who's a bit unsettled, who might be warm, from the environment, that, it's 35 degrees outside, you've got them wrapped up in a blanket, then sure, unwrap them, see how that goes and watch. But of course, if your baby is unwell, please, that's a different kettle of fish. Go ahead and watch our other fever video, please. It's on our Facebook pages and on YouTube, so that you can learn more about fever. So that's really interesting what you said, Deb, about babies not being able to sweat too, because I think this is something that a lot of people don't realise, is that young babies can't do that. So we've talked about taking off some layers, seeing how they go, moving them to a cooler environment. One thing that I'd love to just have a quick chat about today is you mentioned quickly about head coverings too, about hats, for example. Of course, we know that it is not negotiable when our kids go outside that they've got to wear a hat. By the time they get to daycare or preschool, they are only going to be allowed outside if they're wearing hats. So starting young is a really, really good thing. And we want to be able to cover them up like that. When choosing your hat for your baby, it's a really good idea to get the ones that have the strap underneath that can be fastened by a bit of Velcro, or have something that can pop off, so that if they do have their hat on and their hat gets caught, that strap that is underneath actually can easily just pop open, rather than something that has got a toggle on it, or something that you're tying up in a knot or a bow, because that can actually become a strangulation risk. So really thinking about what you're putting on your baby, so that if that hat was to get caught on something. And I've actually seen this happen. I saw a baby, it was actually a friend's baby, who was in the baby carrier, and just on the little button thing that was on the side, the strap of the hat that was on Bub got caught. But what happened was Bub moved their head and the thing just popped open because of the safety mechanism on that. So please make sure that you are choosing wisely when it comes to hats on babies. So, Deb, what else would you like to talk about when it comes to heat and dressing?
Heat. Look, I think, there are 2 things that have just come to mind. One, I just want us to mention headbands. And not because it's related to temperature, just because it's related to safety, and it's very comparable, to what you're talking about, about choosing hats wisely. I personally am not a fan of headbands on babies. I think that they're totally fine if you want to use them for a few minutes for a cute photograph. But I certainly do not recommend keeping them on babies for prolonged periods, especially if you're pushing them around in a pram, you don't have your eyes on them constantly, because they definitely are a strangulation risk, because the majority of those headbands don't actually pop open. The majority of them are actually just a solid, material stretchy band. Anything?
That's exactly right. Oh, I'd love to tell a quick story, Deb, that I think illustrates that point beautifully. I was in the supermarket and I was next to a mum and her baby who was in a forward-facing pram, quite a young baby. And I couldn't see the baby herself, but I could see her legs. And her legs were kicking out in this really strange way. And I thought, oh, that's a very small baby. That's a really weird movement. It just didn't seem right. So I peered around into the pram, and this young baby, her headband had actually come down over her nose and mouth. It was quite a wide headband. It's a bit of a blur, but I grabbed mum's arm at the time. Her mum had her hand on the pram. She was right there, but she just couldn't see because it was forward facing. I've grabbed her and at the same time kind of lifted the thing off her baby. And I think she was freaking out. She thought that I was, obviously doing something to her baby.
Assaulting her baby. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But this baby, then mum realised what was happening, and as we've taken it off, and she just burst into tears. So Bub was asleep, but while baby was moving around, the movement with that headband on had moved it down. So baby was okay. She was bright red in colour. She was in distress, but she was okay.
Red is a good colour.
Red is a great colour. That's right. But I'd hate to think of what could have happened.
Well, totally. Yeah.
Yep. Seconds, literally 30, 60 seconds down the track. And so that's why, certainly here at CPR Kids, we say the same thing as Deb. It is babes in arms for a photo. Absolutely. Pop them on, taking that photo, go for it. But never, ever, ever leave them on, particularly in the pram, the car, putting them to bed. None of that. Got to take them off. Yeah.
Okay. We digressed, but an important one.
We did. That's it. It was very important. Yes.
I guess the other things I just want to mention are heat rashes, because often babies will get them. And I just want to describe what they look like and what to do about them. So a heat rash typically will appear, it's usually actually kind of on the body, the trunk, the parts of their body that are covered and so going to be warmest. And it's just a bumpy little rash. Sometimes it can be blisters, but usually it's just little red bumps. And interestingly, it's itchy. Inherently you wouldn't think it would be, but actually it can be quite itchy. So that's a clue. Yes, your baby may not be developmentally able to scratch the itch, but again, they'll be grizzly. They might be rubbing their head if it's on the back of their neck, or, it depends on where it is. But, they will be irritable from it. And what do? It's just keeping your baby at a cooler temperature, and that'll eventually resolve. It should not cause any ongoing problems at all. The other thing to mention is extreme heat exposure. And here we're talking about babies who, perhaps, God forbid, have been left, in a car or in a hot tent, or, wherever they may be. And what we would normally see is, and I suspect this is for adults too, actually, is a progression from being cranky, irritable, and then slowly going into very lethargic and drowsy. And, that would be your pattern. So a child who is truly, overheated can become very drowsy and lethargic. And, then obviously it goes to life-threatening complications as well. So, Sarah, I don't know if you want to cover some first aid and, in the terrible event that you find yourself and, witnessing a child experiencing that.
Absolutely. I think it's important that we do mention this. So I'm specifically talking about the under fives today. Okay. So specifically the under fives, the key is we want to remove them from that hot environment as soon as possible and have emergency services coming. Because as Deb said, this can very, very quickly become life-threatening. So they go from that drowsiness, as Deb was talking about, to having seizures, becoming unconscious, and going into multi-organ failure. So please, please, please realize that this is a medical emergency. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is remove them from that heat environment and get them into a cooler environment. If there is water available, what we want to do, and remember this is under fives, I'm not talking about over fives or adults today, is that we want to put them in a tepid bath. So that's that lukewarm bath as soon as possible. So if that is available, if it's not available, then what we want to do is that we want to repeatedly moisten their skin all over, either with a cloth or with a spray bottle, something like that, and continuously fan them. So the key is we want to bring their body temperature down. And other thing that's really important is we are not talking about fever here. We are talking about hyperthermia. So that is that your child has been exposed to extreme heat, or for example, being locked in a car, something like that. And it's important to realize that it's not just stinking hot days when it's 35 degrees outside that be a problem. You can have a 22-degree day outside, and the inside temperature of the car can be enough to cause, severe illness in a child. So don't be fooled into thinking that it's just the really hot weather. It can happen just when that sun is shining outside. Okay. Really,
and please
really
remember that for your animals as well.
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly right.
As the temperatures also rise, it only takes a few minutes, and dogs can really become very unwell or even die in cars. So
absolutely.
Sorry, Sarah and I are both dog lovers.
We are. Yeah, even though she knocked over my tea, I still love it a bit.
Exactly.
Yeah. The other thing to mention as well is that, with that extreme heat-related illness, don't give them anything to drink unless they are fully conscious. So you often see in the movies where somebody's, they're pouring water in them and trying to get them to drink. Don't do that. That can be an aspiration or choking risk. If they are fully conscious and able to swallow, then yes, absolutely, we want fluids in them. But if they are not, please don't attempt to pour water down their throat or anything like that. Okay, very important. So the other thing that we were going to talk about as well is prams. So we know that we need to protect our kids from the sun, particularly young babies. We're aware of that. But what we don't want to do is cover the pram up so much that there's no air circulation in there. That's a problem, because without the air circulation, the temperature inside the pram can rise significantly in comparison to the outside temperature. So have a look at the CPR Kids blog on this. We did a little experiment a couple of years ago about inside pram temperatures versus outside, with just one of the thin muslin cloths wrapped around really tightly. And the Red Nose guidelines clearly state, A, you need to be able to see your baby at all times, so they're in your line of sight. 2, make sure that you only use something that is specifically manufactured for your pram. So, for example, you can get the shade covers that go over. They're often mesh, which is
netting.
Breathable. Yep, that's right. And also, the reason they say manufactured for your pram is because that if we're just putting bits of material and so on, it can actually become a strangulation risk for little ones. It would be, it'd be rare for that to happen, but it is a possibility. Red Nose are all about, risk management, and they understand that you've got to cover your bub up. But we just need to be really thinking about these things, because, infant deaths have happened from these sorts of situations. So make sure you can see bub, make sure there's really good air circulation. Use a device that's appropriate for your pram and has been designed for your pram, that allows all of that airflow while still protecting them from the sun. Okay. So that's just a little bit about prams. And Deb, is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we wrap up today?
No, I don't think so.
That's it? Okay. So we do have a question. Lauren, I'm very pleased you asked this question. So Lauren has said, am I right that babies under 6 months shouldn't wear sunscreen? How do I dress my little one to avoid overheating but protecting him from UV rays? Deb will go into this for you, Lauren, but just because I was actually writing a blog about this very subject and we were talking about it in the office yesterday, the Australian College of Dermatologists' positioning statement on this is that you can put sunscreen on babies under 6 months, but they prefer it to be a physical sunscreen, meaning something like a zinc sunscreen, and putting it only on exposed areas and using clothing as much as possible. So that's just their positioning statement, but Deb will go into that now. So Deb, how would you like to answer this?
Yeah, I think also, Sarah, what we can do, can we maybe post a link to, do you remember we did that sunscreen one? It's probably about a year ago when we did a whole talk on sunscreens, and that's exactly what we said at that point. My take on it is actually children of all ages choose a barrier type of sunscreen, not a chemical sunscreen. There's a lot of controversy out there about this. So what I am going to do is say that I prefer to use what's the least toxic option for my own children and by extension, the children that I look after. So that is what I recommend, the barrier creams, and those are your zinc creams. They're exceptionally annoying. I'm going to say that straight up, right? They're annoying because they're hard to put on and they're white and they're sticky and they're thick and they're gross, but they do the job. The reason I don't like the other sunscreens is that some of them do have chemicals that can be absorbed into your baby's bloodstream. And hey, the way that I see it is that we're exposed to so many chemicals we can't avoid. Why can't we just choose not to have some that we can avoid? So that's my take on it. And in terms of under 6 months, exactly what Sarah has just said, it's totally fine to use. I just prefer not to use it all the time. And how do you stop your baby from overheating? Light cotton long sleeve. I guess in an ideal world, we'd be able to get our babies like little cotton caftans, but it's probably not exceptionally safe, but certainly, just a thin cotton long sleeve and long legs, keeping their, feet out as long as they're covered with sunscreen as well. And just because I think they'd overheat if their feet and hands are covered too much. And again, using a nice umbrella, avoiding, the peak hours of UV rays, etc. There's also some great, on that note, as you can also look, there's some great apps where you can look for UV. And I think actually maybe the weather app, even on an iPhone, dictates the UV rays. Yeah.
The SunSmart app's fantastic. It's
the SunSmart, that's what I was thinking of, but then I couldn't remember.
SunSmart app. Can't go past that one. It's just it's got everything you need on it. Really cool.
And the other thing, don't forget, like maybe not an under 6 month old, but older children, don't also forget their eyes with sunlight and sunglasses. But not in such a young baby. It's just not going to happen. And it's not safe.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Jessica, as well. We love doing this. We do this because we really want to be putting out that good evidence-based information. And what we'd love you all to do is let us know what you would like us to talk about. DM us, pop something in the comments below. We would love to know, what do you want to know when it comes to your children's health? And hopefully we'll be able to answer it for you. So, and if we don't, we'll be able to we'll be able to point you in the right direction, I'm sure. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We will be back next week where we'll be talking about cold-related illness and also how to dress your bub for the cooler weather. So we will see you then. Same time, same place. It will be 10 a.m. next Tuesday, Sydney time. So we'll see you then. Thanks, everyone.